personal preference is to have whipped cream on the top of my coffee. Just makes things better. Let's get this video started. Today, we are having a little chit chat. Just some normal talk in between us. Because, you know, I feel like we should get to know each other a little bit more. Because with the 4 videos that I've posted, I feel like you haven't really gotten to know me very well. And that's partially because my mom is always in the house when I'm filming, and I can't be too loud. But you know what? Today I can. Today I want to talk about my reading and writing past. So the way that I have grown up within the reading and writing community, if you can call it that, because I had a very interesting past with literature. I had this issue back when I was a little kid. I really hated reading, like, to an awful extent that I had to go into Spire courses. Spire, it's a learning activity group. Like, you would have some one-on-one sessions, but you would also have some sessions where you were with like 4 other kids. And you would have to do like reading competency tests and reading comprehension tests, which I always failed because I didn't want to do them. It's not that I couldn't read, it's just that I didn't want to. I felt like reading was a punishment. And as a child, I didn't like to be punished. I liked tattling on other people to get them punished. What you gonna do? But anyway, so from 1st grade to 4th grade, I had a Spire reading teacher. I would go out of class for a few hours or 30 minutes every day, and I would sit with that teacher and a few other students, and I would try to read. And I hated it. Every single minute of it. My brother had a few of the same like reading comprehension issues that I had, although I think that he actually had an issue comprehending the reading. I, again, just didn't want to do it. So in 5th grade, I was finally taken out of those Spire reading courses, and I was given the chance to learn on my own. That year wasn't very reading heavy, it was more math heavy, as far as I can remember. And I didn't do any reading outside of what I was required to do for school. But in 6th grade, middle school, we got into real reading in class. And I finally started to realize that maybe I did have a few issues with reading because I did it a lot slower than everyone else. Because in 6th grade, we were told to actually read out what we were reading. And I didn't want to do that. So my teacher, knowing that I had a past with reading comprehension issues, chose to let me pick my own book that I could read on my own outside of class, and I would just participate in class when asked questions. I chose to read The Root Cellar out of like 4 or 5 other books that were given to me. First book I ever finished was The Root Cellar by Janet Lunn. It was okay. Wasn't great, in my opinion. I've read it twice since then, but since it was the first book I had ever actually read, I continued to use that book on every book report for the next like 3 or 4 years. Because when you know something, why let it go to waste? But in 7th grade, I ended up reading a book called Z for Zachariah by Robert C. O'Brien. That was the first book that I actually liked. I found that it was very interesting. I liked the post-apocalyptic feel to the story, and I liked the message that it sent. I did not want to tell anyone that. I refused to give in to the thought of me liking a book. So when teachers asked me, "Oh, did you read that book?" I would say, "No, I got a few chapters in." When in reality, I think I read that book in maybe a day and a half. And that was a big book for a kid my age. For me, I guess, since I didn't really read. From 7th grade to 8th grade, when I had to participate in track after school, I would go to the library after track practice was over, and since I didn't like to read, I would usually sit on the computers that they had and do absolutely nothing but look up weird pictures on the internet. But then my friend was reading a graphic novel and I thought they were very interesting. I like the art style because I've always been quite into art, if I'm being honest. And she was reading Nancy Drew. Now, I had heard of Nancy Drew at that point, but I had never actually read any Nancy Drew books or seen any Nancy Drew like movies or TV shows. So that kind of sparked some interest in me because I was really into the thought of a mystery novel. I think I read like 20 of those Nancy Drew books. They were probably the thing that got me the most interested in reading when I was younger, and I really liked that I could just sit there in my room and read an entire one before dinner. That was the start to my binge reading, which has now become an issue. So that brings us to freshman year, when I was reading what I considered real books. Books that weren't considered part of the school curriculum. So first I read the Castor Chronicles. I read the first 2 books. I didn't bother with the last 2 because I read the first 2 and I was bored by the third. There's a thing about me where I get very bored with having to read the same characters for more than 2 or 3 books at a time. And I just felt like I was giving too much of my effort to understand Ethan and Lena in the Castor Chronicles. So I gave up on that. But then, I found the Hollow Trilogy by Jessica Verde. This was by far my favorite reading experience ever. And from that moment on, I was a reader. I considered myself to be an avid reader, even though I barely read anything. But I was like, yeah, I love reading. It's great. Love it. Cool. Jessica Verde, her writing style is probably one of my favorites that I've ever read. The Hollow Trilogy, it may not be the best literature you've ever read, but it was my favorite thing at the time. I loved Abby and Caspian. They were like OTP to the max. But after that, I was in search of more books like that. Books that were like 3 books long, because that was ideal for me. Anything more than that, I couldn't keep my attention on long enough. So from then I found the Divergent trilogy. Hated the last book. Garbage. During my high school years, I didn't read any contemporary books. For some reason, I just thought, those won't be for me. I won't really like them. Oh boy, was I wrong. So let's speed forward to 2018, last year. I read the most I've ever read in a year. Actually, the most books I've ever read, accumulating everything I had read before that point, 2017 to 1998. I had never read that many books. Ever. In 2018, I found contemporary. I love contemporary. By far my favorite genre ever. I like getting to know a character for just 1 or 2 books. In the Lara Jean trilogy, 3 books. But generally with contemporaries, you don't know them for that long. And I really like that. Like some characters I do want more of, like the Law of Tall Girls, Peyton and Jay. Love them. I could read a dozen more books about them and I would never get bored, because Peyton I just identified with so hard and Jay is just my dream guy in book form. Weird to say that though, because they're underage and I'm 21. But anyway, I've been really into reading since probably freshman, sophomore year of high school. Before that, I hated it. Could do without. But let's get into the writing aspect of my life. Now, I started writing in probably 2010. I started coming up with like my own little short stories in my head that I would like quickly jot down in a school notebook and never see again. But in 2011, I found fanfiction.net. Oh, that site. Fanfiction.net kind of died at some point within the last few years. I feel like that was like 2015 to 2017. They just kind of flatlined. They kind of picked up a little bit at this point. Don't know how. But I was writing Winx Club fanfiction because I desperately wanted a Winx Club season 5 when I was in 7th grade. This was before Nickelodeon was going to take over Winx Club from 4Kids, and I loved that story at that age. I had a self-insert a character that was supposed to be me, but fairy form, because who doesn't do that when they're that age? I was working on that with a friend at the time. I was in charge of dialogue, and then she was in charge of putting description in, because I did not like writing description, and that hasn't changed. But from 2011 to 2015, I was an avid creator on fanfiction.net. At the time, I was also on Fiction Press from 2013 to 2015. And on that website, I was more of an RPer, not a writer. Oh, those times of my life. Times I'll never get back. I do appreciate the people that I met when I was on Fiction Press and on fanfiction, but there are some times that I could do without, if I'm being honest. But I wrote fanfiction for The 9 Lives of Chloe King, Winx Club, Kickin' It, if you remember Jack and Kim. There were another thing, like I wrote a fanfiction on Pitch Perfect. They were bad. I recently reread a few and they're bad. Like, terrible. But in 2015, I began writing my own things. I wanted to break away from the fanfiction community, and I wanted to try my hand at something that I was making. This kind of stemmed from doing the RPs on Fiction Press, because I was creating forums and they were all my story ideas that I just wanted other people a part of. And that was a really big part of getting me to a stage where I felt comfortable writing. I learned a lot of writing tips when I was on Fiction Press. Not really on fan fiction, because that's a different kind of community. But on Fiction Press, some of the kids were older and they were more experienced with wording that I was not. So from 2015 to 2016, I was working with my senior English teacher on editing a first draft that I had done for a novel that I was writing. We only got a few chapters in, probably like 10, and then the year had ended. I'm not currently working on it. I do have a plan to get back to it because I really liked the story concept. It was a story based in Maine, which is where I'm from, and it's about a small town. There's a curse on the town that creates doppelgangers. And that's all I'll have to say about that. I really like the characters that I had come up with. I really enjoyed the mental health aspect that I had written about way back when. And I put that book on hold because of all of the emotions that I had when I was originally writing it. From 2016 to 2018, I didn't write much. I wrote here and there, just like when I was younger. I would put a few entries into a random journal that I had collected, and I would never look at the writing ever again. In March of 2018, I finally started to get real story ideas with like a full plot, which had never happened to me before. I'm a pantser to the very end, but in 2018, I started really thinking about the books that I had ideas for, and I had a plan to actually write a full one. That didn't happen last year. That happened this year, exactly a week ago. I finished my first novella, 25,000 words. Thank you very much. I'm so proud of myself. I finished a book. That's kind of the extent of my reading and writing life. The only other thing that I have to talk about is not having friends that are writers. So I have one single friend that is a writer, and we work together, and he's really, really great, but he's super into fantasy. Like, he loves Brandon Sanderson and he loves Patrick Rothfuss from Name of the Wind, but I'm not really big into fantasy. Like, I'll read the Throne of Glass series. I'm more into paranormal because I liked Hush Hush and the Hollow trilogy. Dystopian's not really my thing, even though I've read a few. Not having many friends that are writers is kind of hard, especially since I really like contemporary. It's hard to bounce ideas off of someone, so that's mainly what I'm looking for on this channel, is so that I can talk to people that actually like the things that I'm writing. So contemporary, paranormal, and a small hint of fantasy. Not much, just a little bit, but that's what I'm looking for. I want friends that are into writing that I can actually have a full conversation with. Like, subscribe, do what you guys do. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.